Elizabeth.
Caroline, one more on.
Elizabeth,
will the
go
president consider pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell
Elizabeth,
if the
go
Epstein case is a hoax?
La secretaria de Donald Trump, Caroline Leavitt, acaba de hacer el ridículo en una de las conferencias de prensa considerada de las más desastrosas de toda esta administración. Y todo esto por no poder enfrentarse a las preguntas sobre el escándalo de Jeffrey Epstein, el cual al parecer no continúa de revelar nuevos datos, nueva información sobre Trump y todos los involucrados. Pues bueno, Leavitt quedó atrapada en una mentira y al parecer lo único que le quedó por hacer es callarse. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente, señores. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme el día de hoy en un nuevo video. Como siempre, si pueden, regálame un like, comparte este video con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal si es que aún no lo has hecho. Eso nos ayuda muchísimo para seguir trayendo más análisis interesantes e información como esta. Bueno, señores, antes de que vayamos directamente a este escándalo de Epstein, quiero hablarles de una noticia de última hora que al parecer Leavitt compartió sobre la salud de Donald Trump. Y créanme, amigos, que lo que dijo es algo que debería de preocuparnos. Y también es un poco sospechoso. Escuchemos.
On another note, I know that many in the media have been speculating about bruising on the president's hand and also swelling in the president's legs. So in the effort of transparency, the president wanted me to share a note from his physician with all of you today. In recent weeks, President Trump noted mild swelling in his lower legs. In keeping with routine medical care and out of an abundance of caution, this concern was thoroughly evaluated by the White House medical unit. The president underwent a comprehensive examination, including diagnostic vascular studies. Bilateral lower extremity venous Doppler ultrasounds were performed and revealed chronic venous insufficiency, a benign and common condition, particularly in individuals over the age of 70. Importantly, there was no evidence of deep vein thrombosis or arterial disease. Laboratory testing included a complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, coagulation profile, D-dimer, B-type natriuretic peptide, and cardiac biomarkers. All results were within normal limits. An echocardiogram was also performed and confirmed normal cardiac structure and function. No signs of heart failure, renal impairment, or systemic illness were identified. Additionally, recent photos of the president have shown minor bruising on the back of his hand. This is consistent with minor soft tissue irritation from frequent handshaking and the use of aspirin, which is taken as part of a standard cardiovascular prevention regimen. This is a well-known and benign side effect of aspirin therapy. And the president remains in excellent health, which I think all of you witness on a daily basis here.
Recientemente hemos visto que hay información por todos lados sobre el tema de los moretones en las manos de Trump. Problemas con los tobillos hinchados y bueno, ¿no? Como sospechábamos, la Casa Blanca pues está cubriendo todo esto, ¿no? Ahora de repente, Caroline Leavitt decide contar que esta complicación médica se debe al estrechón de manos. Y aunque lo dijo a medias, la pregunta es, ¿por qué compartir esto en este momento? ¿Es porque saben que los medios podrían centrarse más tal vez en la salud de Trump en vez del caso de Epstein? Mi impresión es que es el clásico cambio de narrativa, ¿no? Tratando de distraer a la gente. Hacer un giro hacia otro tema, aunque pues es importante, no es lo que más preocupa en este momento, ¿no?
Thank you, Caroline. There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax part?
The president is referring to the fact that Democrats have now seized on this as if they ever wanted transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, which is an asinine suggestion for any Democrat to make. The Democrats had control of this building, the White House, for 4 years, and they didn't do a dang thing when it came to transparency in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and his heinous crimes. It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review of all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which they...
Lo cierto es que la administración de Trump está buscando una distracción. Está utilizando cualquier excusa para poder desviar la atención del escándalo de Jeffrey Epstein. Y no es solo un tema de los demócratas, como Trump quiere hacernos creer. Él está tratando de construir esta narrativa donde la existencia de estos archivos de Epstein es un engaño. Pero a ver, yo les pregunto a ustedes, ¿por qué creen entonces que Maxwell está en prisión? ¿Porque fue procesada por una mentira? A Donald Trump le cuesta aceptar la realidad, y eso es lo que vemos reflejado en la reacción de Caroline Leavitt. Cuando le hicieron esta pregunta incómoda, se quedó sin palabras. Y lo peor es que no ha sido la primera vez que se enfrenta a este tipo de decisiones.
Caroline, one more on.
Elizabeth,
Will the
go
president consider pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell if the Epstein case is a hoax?
Lo que dijo Caroline Leavitt sobre el tema de el juez que no permite que se liberen los documentos, ¿no?, es la mayor mentira que he escuchado. ¿De verdad creen que un juez está deteniendo la verdad? No, señores, esto solo es una excusa tras otra. Esta administración ha mostrado una total falta de transparencia y de respeto por el sistema judicial.
Move on from the story, but you do have some prominent figures, including the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, voicing support for the files to come out. Representative Massey collecting signatures that would force a discharge petition for a vote on the floor for this. It doesn't seem to be going away. What is stopping the administration from just redacting any sensitive information, grand jury information, and putting out what is appropriate so that the American people can decide and then let this story die?
Well, in terms of redactions or grand jury seals, those are questions for the Department of Justice. Those are also questions for the judges who have that information under a seal. And that would have to be requested, and a judge would have to approve it. That's out of the president's control. He has said, in agreement with some of the leaders on Capitol Hill, that if the Attorney General and the Department of Justice come across any other credible evidence, they should provide that to the American people. The president has said that, and he agrees with them on
Why
that.
did you fire Maureen Comey?
The Department of Justice did, and I would defer you to them. Dasha.
Has the White House been directly in
Han desafiado órdenes de jueces y hasta han sido condenados por delitos graves. Y ahora quieren echarle la culpa a un juez. Es un juego de mentiras. Y al parecer la presión no para de aumentar. Tanto demócratas como republicanos están presionando para que estos documentos salgan a la luz. Y aunque Trump y su gente intenten esconder la verdad, ya no van a poder hacerlo por mucho tiempo.
The Republican colleague in the House to try and force a vote on whether the Trump administration should publicly release all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, this is such an interesting development around all of this. You've been working with Thomas Massie on this bill. You had put forward the amendment, which didn't move forward. What does this bill actually do? What would it compel them to release?
So it does two things. First, it forces a vote on the House floor. The Speaker doesn't want to have a vote. This would force a vote if 218 members sign it. And second, it would compel the release of all Epstein files while making it explicitly clear that victims are protected and no child pornography gets released, but all of the evidence, and if there's a client list, that gets out.
So you've worked with Thomas Massie before. This is not your first rodeo with Thomas Massie, but you were just telling me he's gotten more support from Republicans. Where are you right now in terms of the support you need to move this forward?
It's really remarkable. He's been texting me all day. We got Boebert. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene. We have up to 7 Republicans now. When I've worked with Thomas Massie before, it's been on war powers resolution. We're both very passionate that presidents have to come to Congress before taking strikes overseas. We did it to stop the war in Iran. We got exactly 1 Republican, Thomas Massie. And now we have 7. And it shows that this is a real fracture in the Republican base.
And that's enough, isn't it?
That's enough. So the way this works is the bill needs to be on the calendar for 7 days. After 7 days, we can get the signatures. Unfortunately, Congress will be in recess in August. But when we come back, we'll have the signatures, and then we get a vote. But what's happening is the president is hearing this and responding. He's not just lashing out at Thomas Massie on Truth Social, where he's getting ratioed for the first time. But he's also now saying, look, he wants to appoint a special prosecutor. I think what the lesson for Democrats is, look, we don't have to respond to Trump in kind. When he insults us, we don't have to just insult him back or get in the gutter. We can actually fight him in a very smart way, which is to say this populism was a house of cards. You said that the government was corrupt. You said that you didn't want to protect rich, powerful men. And then when you had the chance to release the files about protecting rich, powerful men to protect our children, you bluffed.
But don't you think that's all just him melting down and freaking out? I mean, even the special prosecutor thing, which the headline in that is totally misleading, because he's basically trying to add in a bunch of disproven things that he's saying he's going to declassify.
Exactly.
It's not a real thing. But this is him kind of melting down and seeing the pressure, I think. But let me ask you about, because there's these 7 Republicans. I can't imagine you ever thought you'd be on something with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, but here we are in July of 2025. How do you keep them on board through a very long August recess where they're going to get pressure from Trump in the White House, probably be cheered by the manosphere? Is that what your hope is?
You know, I originally would tell you that they were going to fold. I mean, that's been the case when it comes to Medicaid cuts. That's been the case when it's come to Iran and the strikes. But in this case, there's something different. And what's different is the MAGA base really is disappointed in Donald Trump. I mean, they voted for him because they thought the whole system was corrupt. They voted for him because they thought he was going to clean this up. And you know what I've told someone? I said more damaging for Donald Trump than being in the Epstein files is that he's not releasing them. I think if he was in the Epstein files, that's sort of baked in. People are like, okay, won't be shocked. But he promised that he was going to take down these rich and powerful people. And he's not doing that. And so I think in this case, the pressure is only going to build. The fact that they're co-sponsoring this, that's even a stronger sign than just signing a discharge petition.
Yeah, it probably depends on how he's in the Epstein files. If he's in there, I have no idea.
No van a poder seguir escondiéndose detrás de excusas. El muro de las mentiras de esta administración de Trump se está derrumbando. Y aunque intenten distraer a la gente, la verdad sale a la luz tarde o temprano. Como dijo, ¿no?, el representante Rukan. Los republicanos también están comenzando a ver que el costo de proteger a Trump podría ser más grande de lo que están tratando de proteger. Ahora bien, amigos, quiero que pasemos al siguiente tema. Y es que, al parecer, Trump no quiere aceptar un no por respuesta sobre la nominación de Emil Bove. Un tipo que dijo que había que ignorar las órdenes de los jueces. Hablamos del tipo que está a punto de convertirse en un juez federal. Y lo peor es que no es una broma, ¿no? Porque es este plan de la agenda de Trump. Y al parecer está cerca de lograrlo, al menos más de lo que creemos. Emil Bove, un personaje oscuro con un historial sumamente preocupante, señores, y según denuncias, hasta dispuesto a pasarse por encima de la ley, es el nuevo favorito de Trump, y lo quiere en una posición clave dentro del Poder Judicial. Vamos a desmenuzar esta noticia, pero antes veamos este fragmento de un segmento muy completo, ¿no?, para poder entender bien el contexto de lo que trata esta noticia.
Joining us now, NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, New York Times Chief White House correspondent, and MSNBC political analyst Peter Baker, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Ryan, I'm not quite sure I've ever seen anything quite like what happened in the Judiciary Committee today. Am I wrong? Is this normal practice?
It's certainly not normal practice, Katie. I'm not saying it's unprecedented, but it is certainly out of the norm to see an entire panel of a hearing break apart because one side of the aisle decides to walk out en masse in protest. And what you see Democrats doing here is really the only tool they have in their toolbox when it comes to Republican control of both the House and Senate, and that's to try and grind the gears of this process down as slow as possible. And there's enough votes here for Emil Bove to win confirmation ultimately on the Senate floor and to get out of this committee. But what Democrats would like to do is try and put as much out there about this nominee so that perhaps if there is a Republican that's worried or concerned about the nomination, that they would think twice before voting no. I mean, it would be the Republican goal to move this forward as quickly as possible so that nothing else can be brought out about him that could be a problem. And what Democrats would argue here, Katie, is that this is a lifetime appointment. There should be as much vetting of this candidate as possible. We should hear from everyone who has insight into his work at the Department of Justice and in other places before they cast this vote. And that's one of the reasons, among the things they're asking for more than anything, is the opportunity for this whistleblower to come forward and testify about their experience with Bove at the DOJ.
What has the whistleblower said, Lisa?
The whistleblower publicly has said that Bove not only told people that they had to be prepared to potentially say F you to courts if they were given orders that were contrary to what the administration wanted from an immigration agenda perspective, but he has also said, Katie, in ways that are even more troubling, that the entire attitude of the Department of Justice was to prepare for, basically, to prepare for ways of skirting various court orders in ways that he considers to be antithetical to the rule of law. He has not come forward publicly on television or radio. He has spoken to a couple of print publications. There's no indication that Erez Ruveni wants to talk to the Judiciary Committee, but Democrats are very eager to hear from him about his interactions with Emil Bove, which they say reinforce a number of other episodes in his career showing that he is not fit for a lifetime judicial appointment.
In normal circumstances, or have we had any past experience with a nominee for the federal bench who's got a whistleblower out there claiming that he's telling lawyers to ignore court orders? Anybody that's been anything like, in your knowledge, Emil Bove, nominated and then pushed through the Senate Judiciary Committee without much of a hearing on it, or at least not an airing of concerns, a fulsome airing of concerns, and then put to a lifetime appointment on the federal bench?
No, and I will tell you that Erez Ruveni is represented by some folks at the Government Accountability Project, who are a nonpartisan organization that has a long history with Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley. I would think that they are beside themselves right now to see Chuck Grassley describe this as a partisan attack on Emil Bove, because if you read all of the emails that Erez Ruveni submitted to Dick Durbin and his team, you will see that this is not a person who is a lifetime progressive or anything like it. He was a true believer in an immigration enforcement agenda. And in fact, in one of these emails, he says to people from the State Department, Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice, one of the reasons we don't flout court orders, and he was talking specifically about the Abrego Garcia case, is if you flout a court order with respect to this one individual, you are putting your entire immigration agenda at risk. Think twice before doing it. Those are not the musings of some crazy liberal.
It is remarkable what Donald Trump is doing in this second administration, Peter Baker, because in the first one, there were obviously controversial choices for judgeships for the Supreme Court, yes. But Emil Bove is out of step with even those controversial figures. Those people who have gone up through the ranks of conservative legal circles, they're part of the Federalist Society. There might be disagreements among policy and perspective and reading of the Constitution, reading of the law. But correct me if I'm wrong, Emil Bove is of a different sort.
Yeah, he is, obviously. I think what President Trump did in his first term was to some extent outsource a lot of the judicial picks that he made to Senator McConnell, who was then the majority leader and very much cared about the nature of the court. And McConnell wanted conservatives on the court, and he was willing to push them through, and they did push through a remarkable number in that first term. But they weren't all Trump loyalists, per se. And Trump has been disappointed by that. He's been disappointed to find that judges are not bending to his wishes on policy issues and other issues. And he's been particularly upset when Trump appointed judges haven't done that. So I think in this second term, loyalty to him matters more than ideological consistency or, judicial preparation or constitutional scholarship. And it's hard to think of a more, classic example than putting your own criminal defense attorney on a federal appellate court. And so he's going to push through Emil Bove, and he's not going to take no for an answer from Republicans. And it's possible that one or two might vote against him on the floor, but it does appear, as Ryan was saying, that he probably does have the votes.
How credible are these rumors circulating around Washington, Peter, that if there is an open seat on the Supreme Court, Bove would be Donald Trump's nominee?
I think it's a very credible possibility. Absolutely. You know, with Trump, obviously, you want to be careful about making any predictions because anything can happen. But he would certainly be on any list, I think, that MAGA advisors would want Trump to look at. And he obviously has the president's ear and has the president's faith. You know, he would be somebody who would be a different kind of justice than the three that Trump put in the first term. The three that he put in the first term, you know, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, were not Trump loyalists per se. They weren't people that he knew personally. They were recommended to him by conservative legal scholars, the Federal Society, and so forth. And at times he's been very unhappy that those three haven't gone along. And they've supported him on a lot of issues, but at times he's been disappointed with them. Emil Bove would be very different. It's not the first time a president would put a personal lawyer or friend on the Supreme Court. LBJ did that with Abe Fortas, his personal attorney back in the day. That's happened with other presidents as well. But this is a very different moment and a kind of a very polarized judiciary.
Is there a Supreme Court justice that looks like they might be retiring, Peter?
Nobody knows that for sure. I think a lot of conservatives are looking at Clarence Thomas and wondering whether he might want to step down at some point during Trump's term to give him the opportunity to replace him with a full-throated conservative. You know, obviously, with the age of these justices, they're younger than a lot of justices have been over the years, but you never know with any of them whether they might at some point or another have to think about retiring. But the one that everybody's watching most, I think, at this point is Clarence Thomas.
All right. Let me play a little bit from one of the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, Democrat Sheldon Whitehouse, who is the ranking member. He spoke with my colleague, Ana Cabrera, a little bit earlier today. Let's listen.
Bove is a bad guy. Simple as that. In just 6 months, in just 3 things that we know about, he's been involved in 3 really major incidents of prosecutorial misconduct. So God knows what he'll get up to in a lifetime position on the court.
Did you ever imagine that your Republican colleagues would simply move forward on a nomination like this?
No, this is the worst of the worst.
Donald Trump quiere nominar a Emil Bove para una corte federal. Pero la pregunta primero es ¿quién es este tipo? Nada más y nada menos que su abogado defensor personal para los casos criminales. Hablamos de que es el mismo que lo ha estado representando en juicios donde él enfrenta cargos muy graves. Lo realmente alarmante, ¿no?, es lo que reveló un denunciante del Departamento de Justicia, que Emil Bove alentó a otros abogados a ignorar órdenes judiciales si es que éstas iban en contra de la agenda de Donald Trump, exactamente sobre el tema migratorio. O sea que si un juez decía deportar a esta persona está prohibido, él básicamente respondía hazlo igual. Y si el juez se enoja, pues dile no me importa. ¿Nos damos cuenta del nivel de locura que significa esto, señores? O sea, es un tipo que literalmente aconseja desobedecer la ley con un juez federal. Y ahora quieren hacerlo juez, y no cualquier juez. Hablamos de una posición vitalicia. Más de 900 exfiscales y funcionarios del Departamento de Justicia tuvieron que firmar una carta pidiendo al Senado que no lo confirmen. Imaginen, hasta este punto. Y ojo, no se trata de demócratas llorones, como dice Trump. Estamos hablando de profesionales legales en todos los aspectos políticos diciendo con claridad: esto es intolerable. Pero Trump, como siempre, hace oídos sordos. ¿Por qué? Porque ya no busca jueces conservadores como lo hizo en su primer mandato, recomendados por la sociedad federal. No, señores, ahora él quiere de jueces a personas que sí van a ser leales a él, fanáticos, gente que esté dispuesta a protegerlo a toda costa. Y lo más perturbador es que está dispuesto a recompensar con poder judicial a quienes lo ayuden a esquivar la justicia. Sé que algunos podrían decirme, bueno, esto no es tan raro, que otros presidentes han nominado a amigos o aliados. Y sí, es cierto, pero esto es mucho más allá de eso, amigos. Aquí no hablamos solo de amistad, hablamos de complicidad. Hablamos de poner en el poder a alguien que ya ha demostrado que está dispuesto a pisotear la ley si es que eso favorece a su jefe político. Y encima, hay rumores muy fuertes de que Trump podría incluso nominarlo a la Corte Suprema, si es que se abre una vacante. O sea, solo quiero que imaginen un tipo que se burló de las cortes tomando decisiones que afectan la vida de millones por décadas. Lo de Emil Bove, amigos, no es un caso aislado, ¿no? Es parte de este patrón, este plan de Trump. Quiere asegurarse de quedarse en el poder. Quiere asegurarse de que nadie pueda juzgarlo, que no hayan jueces para frenarlo. Y seamos honestos, es lo más peligroso que puede pasar en una democracia. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Será que debería el Senado bloquear esta nominación? ¿A ustedes les parece que un abogado que te aconseje ignorar la ley merece una silla en la Corte Federal? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, compártelo con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.